This is probably one of the oldest questions that I get online, and I'll read it to you right now, and we're going to talk about it in this episode of the No Money Real Estate Podcast. Ken, how in the hell are you able to raise so much money the way that you do? I've been struggling trying to raise $500,000 for my renovations for the last year and a half. I'm going to unpack this today. This is a really, really significant question. This person is looking for a very simple answer, but this answer is a 20-year history that I'm going to explain to you right after this.
Hey, my name's Ken, and I'm a real estate investor. I want to welcome you to the No Money Real Estate Podcast. On this show, I'm going to interview elite-level real estate investors from all over North America, and I'm going to help you to see one thing that all successful real estate investors have in common. They built their portfolios without using a dime of their own money. I've got a portfolio of $300 million in real estate. That includes resorts, apartment buildings, commercial buildings, and I built the entire portfolio without using a dime of my own money. Real estate is a business that anybody can get into, but the strategies that those tight real estate investors use to build massive portfolios have been kept secret for decades. Now, because of this show, I'm going to reveal them to you. So let's get started.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's talk about fundraising and the art of closing the deal. First, I want to help everybody to understand a little bit of my background. And this is probably long overdue. You know, the more popular you get, the bigger your following gets, the more you do in life, the more haters you're going to have that are criticizing you. And that criticism of you really has very little to do with what you're doing, but more so it's showing a inferiority complex in them. So first and foremost, I'll say just ignore it if it ever comes, because it doesn't mean anything. Focus on the people that you're meant to serve and really stay focused on that. But I think if you really want to understand the art of closing, the art of raising money and all things around that, you need to understand how I developed this. And if I just take a few minutes to walk you through it and help you to understand it, then you can take that information and you can extrapolate that and see how that goes, all right? So my background, I spent 15 years in investigative policing. Over that 15 years, the number one thing that I focused on was the art of interrogation. Now, police interrogation is not like you see on TV shows where they've got, the guy strapped to the counter and they're beating his hands, or the cop comes up with a phone book in his hand and punches the phone book to stop from bruising somebody. That's not how interrogation works. Interrogation is about building a relationship with somebody and getting them to agree with your side of thinking or your train of thought. And it really is that. I learned interrogation when I was in my early 20s, and I took a number of courses that were led by the police detective from Florida State Police who got Ted Bundy to confess to those crimes. And I don't say that to impress you about that specific incident, but rather he was in an interrogation room with Mr. Bundy for 28 hours, I believe it was. I can't remember the exact time, but the fact of the matter is, in those initial conversations that I had, in that initial training that I had, the thing that I left the training with, and I've guided my whole life through, is understanding this one thing. And I learned this saying in sales, but it applies to interrogation. It applies to everything that I do today. It applies if you're trying to raise capital and convince people to give you money to do things in real estate, then you have to understand people will only buy from you if they know you, they like you, and they trust you. So that's the sales idea. And we have a great sales team. Actually, we have several sales teams in our companies, and I pretty well primarily teach all the salespeople, and that is the one adage that I teach all of them. People will not buy from you unless they know you, they like you, and they trust you. And over my career as a police interrogator, I was involved in 18 major interrogations and had 17 confessions. And the longest I ever went toe-to-toe with the bad guy was 24 hours. Like literally in and out of a room, not much bigger than this studio, for 24 hours to get that person to confess. It was really funny because if you think about that scenario of a police interrogation, here's what happens in Canada before a police interrogation actually happens. So the law enforcement, police officers, are not able to effect an arrest unless there's reasonable and probable grounds for that arrest. So that means a murder happens. Friends, in most murders in our country, law enforcement has a good idea of who committed the murder within 24 hours of the crime happening. And then once that happens, law enforcement will surveil the individual, keep following them until their detectives and their evidence collectors find enough evidence that they can arrest and charge the person. So it's reasonable and probable grounds means that you have to have that understanding of culpability to arrest the person. But then if you want to actually charge them, it goes one step further and it goes to a stage that is called beyond a reasonable doubt. If you want to charge somebody with a crime, you have to have collected enough physical evidence that you can prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt or a shadow of a doubt. So you have to look forward when you're doing this police investigation, and you have to determine that the evidence that you've collected in that situation is beyond refute. So what does that have to do with police interrogation? Well, if in these cases where I would be the person that was interviewing the bad guy who committed the heinous crime, think about what had to happen before that. This person had to be arrested. And that person would be arrested, and they'd get a chance to call their lawyer. And the lawyer would say, hey, listen, you're in custody right now, and you're going to have to go and sit down. They're going to try and get you to talk to somebody who's going to try and get you to confess to this, whether you did it or not. This is what the lawyer is saying confidentially to his client. And I have to tell you, these police interrogators, there's only a couple of them in that city, and they sometimes even knew our names. And they'd say, there's this guy named Ken, and he's a really nice guy, but you have to be careful because his only goal, he's going to make it sound like he's your best friend, but his only goal is to get you to confess to this crime. Do not do it under any circumstances. It would be hours after that. They talked to their lawyer, they've been in the cell, then we'd have to give the detectives enough time to get all the information together and give me that information so I could start formulating my plan for when I'm in the interrogation. So it'd be a couple hours. And finally I'd go into the room, and he knew why he was there, and all he can think about what the lawyer said. And he'd be sitting in the corner and he'd be all bundled up, like the body language says he's never going to talk to me. And I'd start the interrogation by reading the formalities and making sure he understood who I was and what the allegations against him were and all the rest of it. But then as soon as I got through that, I would look at him and I'd say, hey, listen, your lawyer told you not to talk to me. I'm the nice guy he was telling you about. And we're in trouble here. We're really stuck in this situation because I need to be in here long enough to prove to my bosses that I tried. And you don't want to talk about this, and so I'm a bit of at a loss. What should we talk about? Anyway, I'd get them talking about something, and really the first step in the interrogation is called the hunt for common ground. And what that means is I'm going to keep talking to him about a various amount of subjects until I can find something that's a passion for his that gets him talking. And we don't want it to be anything to do with the crime or anything related to the crime. And we'll find all this in our research before I go into that interrogation. So let's say we find out from his social media that he loves fishing. Well, I love fishing. I'm going to start talking about fishing. And we'll get him talking then. And then we'll slowly bring it back around to the crime, and we'll confront him about the crime. And because I've built trust with him and he's had a good conversation with me about something he likes, he's more likely to confess. Now, what in the world does that situation have to do with closing sales or getting investors or building relationships? It has everything to do with it. Now, I don't want anybody to manipulate this conversation that I'm having with you right now and say, oh yeah, Ken's manipulating everybody. No, it's not like that at all. But think about the story I just told you, and then think about that sales adage I started this conversation with. People will only buy from you if they know you, they like you, and they trust you. So the idea is, if you are waiting till you need to raise money for your project to start this process, then you've already failed. In the world we live in today, you have to understand that people will not invest in your project unless they know you, they like you, and they trust you. People do not invest in apartment buildings. People do not invest in resorts and hotels. People do not invest in projects. People invest in people. And understanding that is probably the first step in becoming a master fundraiser. If you just take a look at the whole platform that I've created online today, go to Google and Google my name. You will see the first 14 pages of Google is dominated by stuff about me, and it's intentionally created by me over the last 20 years. All of that stuff on Google comes from all the social media channels. So if you're trying to raise money in a real estate deal, you need to create a social presence around real estate investing. If you want to build a massive portfolio, go look at somebody you know that has a massive real estate portfolio online. And what are you going to find? You're going to find they have a presence on every channel. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, every channel that's out there. You're going to see that. And listen, it's not about mastering every channel. If you look at my following, you'll see my biggest following is on Facebook because I'm older. I don't have a massive amount of people following me on TikTok. I have more people following me on Instagram. My YouTube channel is growing really well, and I'm dominating Google. And I've got a really significant following on LinkedIn as well. I basically have a significant following on all the old guy channels. But it's okay because it's about omnipresence. Omnipresence is a word that's become really popular in social media over the last, I want to say 5 years, but that's what you really want to do. You want to start building a following online. Why is that important? It's because Google is an aggregator. So what that means is if somebody Googles your name, all Google's going to do is take everything they can find about you online and drop it in one place. So have a website with your name. My website is kendunn.com. Have a website for your company. Have a website for your project. And make sure that those websites, one of two ways those websites should be built today, either in WordPress or ClickFunnels. The funnel company has just launched a new version of their platform called ClickFunnels 2.0, where they've done an amazing job of allowing people to build a website through their funnel system, but these websites still optimize just like a WordPress site does. So I'd say use one of those two platforms and get a website built for yourself. And then the next thing is start publishing content about real estate investing or related to real estate investing on all the social media platforms. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. I hear this all the time. People say, oh, fuck, I don't want to do that. I hate talking in public. I hate publishing content on social media. I hate doing this. Well, if you fucking hate doing that, then stop trying to build a real estate portfolio. That's really what it comes down to. If you look at anybody that has a massive real estate portfolio, you're going to find a couple things about them in common. And the most important of the things that you're going to find is they are incredibly articulate communicators. They have no issue speaking in public. They're very comfortable doing it. And they're very, very good at building relationships. That's the key. So you build all these social media platforms for a couple of reasons. Number one, it allows you to practice. When I first started doing videos on social media, I wasn't as comfortable as I am today. And if you want to see that, go back to the very first videos on my YouTube channel and look at those videos and compare them to this video. It takes time to do that. It's taken me 20 years to get to the point that I can raise capital the way that I am and I can close the deal. So you build this foundation so you can become more confident in your delivery. The next thing that you want to do is you've got to make sure that when you're raising capital for any project, whether it's $100,000 you need to do a property flip, or it's $180,000 you need to, as the last piece of funding to buy a little apartment building, be professional about it. Whenever I raise capital, I literally start off by going to my attorneys. We have a relationship with Castles. This is a major law firm that focuses on all elements of the law, the legal world, but inside of that company, they have securities experts. Our personal counsel for our company, his name is Doug McCartney. I'll put his information in the chat. If anybody's looking for a great lawyer for real estate, he's the best. He's one of the best in this whole freaking country. So whenever we're raising money, the very first thing I do is I go to him, and Doug puts together the legal documents. It's called a term sheet, which outlines the project. Then I create a Google Drive, and in that Google Drive, I write a detailed business plan, and I put lots of pictures in it. Then I get appraisals done to justify the values, and I put those in there. And then I get Doug to put together a loan agreement, and I put a sample of that in there. So I have this Google Drive that has every document they could possibly need, and they're all professionally prepared. Why? Because number one, when they learn about the project, they want to look at those documents first, and they want to see that they're professionally created. That starts to give them the right feelings about you. And then before they ever talk to you, you know what they're going to do? They're going to Google you. They're going to Google you. The next thing that you should do, the next thing I do whenever I'm talking to anybody about real estate, the bigger you get, the more massive your following gets, the more you're going to be attacked and criticized. So you need to do things to protect you at every step of the way. I take all my counsel from Doug McCartney about how I operate. So whenever I'm talking to somebody that I need to, when I'm raising capital for a project and I need to talk to them, I always do it on a private one-on-one Zoom call, and I record the calls. And I keep 100% of the recordings, so that if I ever get criticized for something that I'm doing, I can go and show people the recordings and say, we're following the law, we're following everything. So you've got to, in the world we live in today, it's not just about how do you get money from people, it's how do you get money from people in a way that's compliant and in alignment with the law. So using a really good securities attorney is going to help you to do that. So you've got that side taken care of. You've built a beautiful package. If they go to Google and they search you, they're going to see professional content. They're going to see an enormous amount of content, which what's that going to do? It's going to start giving them confidence. When they look at your lender's package, they're going to see that your securities lawyer is Doug McCartney or whoever that person is. They're going to see you've got professional appraisals done. What does all this stuff do? It gives them more confidence. Now, I get them into that state before they ever get into a one-on-one conversation with me. Now, let's talk about that one-on-one conversation. This is the closing the deal. That's what that question was about. So whenever I'm raising capital for a project now, what I do is I go and I host an online webinar presentation, a live presentation where I'll explain the whole project, and I'll invite people to book a private call with me. So I'll do a presentation where I'll have 100 people there, and I'll book 20 calls. Now, when I book those 20 calls, because I've gotten the right counsel from Doug McCartney, there are things that I have to make sure that I follow when I do this. The first thing is there are rules in Canada. When I have a term sheet, which is what Doug has prepared for me to raise the capital for my project, whether it's like 50 grand or 100 grand, the rules in Canada that are written and enforced by the securities commissions in the provinces says that somebody can only invest with me if they're an accredited investor. Now, there is a way you can open the net a bit wider and go talk to people that are called eligible investors, which is lower down, but it's enormous. It's significant amounts of paperwork beyond that. So for most of my projects, I can raise the capital that I need just with that term sheet talking to accredited investors. An accredited investor is somebody who makes at least $250,000 a year in income, or between their household. So their partner that they cohabitate with, they can make $300,000 in income, or they can have $1 million in hard assets, meaning cash, real estate, et cetera, but the $1 million cannot include their primary residence. So when I'm meeting with somebody, it's my job to make sure that they're an accredited investor, and I'll ask them questions about it, and I'll get them to prove to me that they are, and it's all recorded so that I have it. Now, there are some exemptions, some exceptions to this. And the exceptions are they don't have to be accredited if they're a personal family member, like a blood relationship, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a cousin. Or they're a business associate, or they're a friend. Now, these exemptions get abused. Everybody does that. They'll go meet somebody in a phone call and they'll say, okay, now we're friends, I can take your money. It doesn't work like that. And when you're going to be spoken to about this, when they're going to start investigating you is when something goes wrong and it's too late to fix anything. So my advice to you is know the rules and live by the rules. So now I get on a call with somebody and I've determined that they are an accredited investor. How you communicate with that person in that one-on-one conversation, if you've set all this up properly, will actually determine if you get the money or not. The first thing I'm going to advise you of, if you've done everything else I've said, so you've got a term sheet, you've got legal advice, you've proved they're accredited investors, the first piece of advice I want to give you in the art of closing is act as if. What that means is in your first conversation with them, act as if they've already given you the money. People don't want stuffy shirts. They want to see the real you. So let them see the real you. Have a good conversation with them. Smile. Talk to them at their level. And what that means is when I'm on a Zoom call with them, I will literally take note of how they show up on that call. And if they're sitting on the edge of their seat and they're sitting front and proper, then I'll do the same. But if they're more relaxed and sitting in the back of their chair, I'll do the same. It happens natural for me because that makes them more comfortable. I don't ever want to be overbearing on them. And I'll pay attention to that stuff. And then I'm going to start having just a general conversation with them because I want to get to know them, because the other side of the coin is how you think. And this is another super important part of closing in real estate or closing in general. People will only buy from you if they know you, like you, and trust you. So if you've done everything else I'm talking about properly, and now you're in this one-on-one conversation, you got to get them to like you. And I want you to think for a second about conversations you've had and people you've been around and who's liked you and who hasn't. If you're going to get somebody to like you, what do you think are the most important parts of doing that? It's really how you come across, right? It's how you talk. It's the tone of your voice. And friends, this is the part I had the most trouble with. I used to be a police detective. I used to be on a SWAT team. I used to do a lot of stuff with a very loud voice. And you can hear in this conversation that I can still be very loud naturally. So when I'm in those interviews, I know what my issues are. I know my communications patterns, and I've studied my communication ability and the way I communicate so that when I'm in those very important conversations, I know how to adjust it. I know how to slow it down. I know how to speak with less intonation in my voice. And all that stuff is important. And then finally, if you go into that conversation and you act as if, so you're going to learn very early on that they have the money to do it because they're accredited investors and they've explained all that to you and they've gone through the information, you hope. So I'll ask them, I'll have a great conversation with them. I'll get to know them. I want to know who they are. I was talking about mindset and I don't want to lose this point. Here's another thing that I think is very, very important. If you're raising money from people, you have to 100% believe with all your heart that you're helping them, that you're providing an opportunity for them so they can make more money in their lives, and you're helping them because you're providing that opportunity. If you can get your mindset into a true belief that that's the situation, it's going to be easier for you to raise the money. Then that mindset where you're saying, oh shit, I need this person to give me the money. If I can't, I don't know how I'm going to get this project done. So it's really about how you think, because how you think and what you believe, that's the energy you're going to portray to those other people. So now I'm in this conversation. The stage was set properly. That's a great way to say it. Like all the social media, Google and all that stuff. And my lender's packaged together, and I've got the appropriate legal advice that I'm following. So I've confirmed that they're accredited investors. And then when I'm in that call, I take time to have a good conversation, focusing on building a relationship with them. And then at the appropriate time, after I know we've had a good conversation, 10 or 15 minutes, I'll say, do you have any other questions about the project? That's the first time I mentioned the project to them. It's probably 15 or 20 minutes into the call, and I never sit back and do a pitch and say, oh, I'm so excited about this project. We're going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to build this apartment building, and everything's going to be great. And no, I don't want to disrespect them. So I'm going to say, I'm going to have a great conversation where we're going to chit-chat for a little bit, and then I'm going to say, hey, do you have any other questions? Did you come with any questions about the information you've reviewed about our project? And they're going to be honest with me. I didn't really have time to review the information yet. Or, yeah, I do, and here's my questions. So I'll answer all the questions for those people that have their questions there. And I'll answer all the questions, which brings me to another point. Don't ever try and raise money for anything unless you can answer the questions. So what you want to do whenever you're raising capital, put your package together, get your legal advice, get ready, and then go to somebody who understands real estate as well as you do and role play with them. Let them ask you questions. You have to know those questions. If you want to listen to a really amazing authority on fundraising and closing people, follow Michelle Romanow. She's a Canadian authority. She's probably one of the top female fundraisers in Canada. She's on Dragon's Den. She has some really amazing content about this topic. But you really have to get to the point where you can answer all the questions. And it takes practice. Michelle talks about in her trainings how she would practice for a pitch 30, 40 times before she would actually do it the first time. Now, I'm at a point now where I don't need to practice the answers to the individual questions because the questions are all relatively the same or in the same area, and I can answer those questions. And it's not because I've set the whole thing up to be fake. It's because it's real. It's because I have a great project. It's because I've put together the requisite documents for the project. It's because I've gotten the right legal advice from a securities attorney, and I'm following that advice in all my conversations. What that does is it gives me confidence. And when I have that confidence, it allows me to adjust my personality so that I can focus on building a relationship with the person I want to give me the money, and I can focus on their interests because I know everything else is taken care of. And then the final part is once I've answered the questions, I just look at them and say, are you ready to invest in the project? And 95% of the time they say yes. Or if I say to them, have you reviewed the information? They say, I didn't have a chance to get that information yet. You know what I do? I look at them and I say, can I book another appointment with you? I'd really like you to take a look at this information and put some questions together so that I know you've had a chance to review everything. And they really appreciate that too. Anyway, friends, listen, I could spend another 5 hours talking about raising money for real estate and closing the deal and getting the money you need. This was a really good overview. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, feel free to ask me any questions you want in the chats. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you give us a review if you want me to create more content like this. And listen, if you're watching this on YouTube, I would love it if you want me to focus on creating more content around raising capital for real estate. Just ask me to in the chat. If I get enough people that ask me to do that, then I'll do it. Have a great day, everybody.